Welcome to the Vineyard Church podcast. For more information, visit us at vkcwest.com.
So we are in the story of Ruth. So Ruth is an Old Testament book, and it's right in between the book of Judges and the book of 1 Samuel. So because of that, it's a transitionary time where there weren't kings to the people of Israel yet. They had come into the promised land. They had fought the people that had it before, and God said, go in, and they overtook them. And now they're there, and they're like, what do we do? But their hearts kept straying from God. Their hearts kept walking away from God. And so then they'd get themselves in trouble, and then God would rise up a judge that would deliver them once they turned their hearts right. And then that would happen over and over again. This time period that we see was probably during the time, of Gideon. You know, if you read in Judges, Gideon and what he did, just amazing story. Probably around that period of time. But the story of Ruth is all about redemption. And so we're in our fifth week. And Naomi, Elimelech, and their sons, they go to a foreign land because there's a famine. Elimelech and his two sons both die. So now Naomi is a widow, and she has these two daughter-in-laws. One daughter-in-law stays back. The other daughter-in-law, Ruth, says, I'm going to come with you, because Naomi's like, look, I've messed up my life. I'm broken. I need to go back to where God is and where God is moving, and I need to seek him. And so Ruth says, I will go, and it's that verse that's read at weddings so many times, I will go, with you. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And it's just this great commitment and love. So in the midst of the brokenness and hope, though, as they're seeking God, there's actually, hope that rises up, and then beauty that rises up in the brokenness. And then we see the characters, Naomi and Ruth and Boaz, loving on purpose. Like they're being intentional about the way they're loving with one another. And we talked about that last week, about how it's important that we are intentional with the people in our lives, that we're intentional, that we're upfront with them, and we love them on purpose. We don't play games. We love them on purpose. And so today we see living for beyond now. And now is a hard thing. I would say I struggle more with like it, in some ways, like settling into now. Just saying like, okay, just enjoy the moment. Like I have to really fight that, because I'm always looking, all right, go, right? But there's something to that, like to enjoying the moment, enjoying the now. But it's also complicated because, you should soak in the moment. You should take it all in. But the recipe for now, there's a blind spot, right? The blind spot is that thousands and millions of nows combine for your destiny. And so if the way you approach living in the now as eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, well, you put all those moments together and you're building something unhealthy, right? If what you do in the moment is healthy, well, right on. It builds a destiny of health and life versus death and unhealth. You know how it is. Like if you eat only for now, you just eat like what feels good now, well, then what you end up with is not necessarily healthy. But if you eat for 5-10 years from now, like the health you'd like to have, or the life you'd like to live, then you'll be healthier. Same thing with money. Like if you just spend money like I want, and you spend it, well, then you'll get stuff now, but you won't build anything over time. Same thing with relationships. If it's just all about you and versus sacrificing and loving somebody and serving somebody, then you'll get something different over that time. So the problems of now too is we lack perspective, especially when we're young. I one thing I really appreciate as being a 40-something year old man is that I have much more perspective than I did in my 20s, in my teens. When situations and things happen, I'm able to look at them differently because of this perspective I've gained by living, and then also by walking with God. And so, when you're in college or high school or middle school or something, any little event, can seem just huge, or you don't get to where you want to go right away. It just seems overwhelming. And so it's beyond now. Actually, like, this is going to work differently. Our circumstances and our challenges can be insurmountable in now if we just focus on now. There's lagging indicators and leading indicators. So lagging indicators is you step on the scale. Okay. The scale tells you what you've done, like what your now moments have come up with. Okay. But the lagging indicator, which most people pay attention to, is actually less important than the leading indicator. The leading indicator is that what am I doing now? So it's kind of, it's strange. It's like so much of what I've done to this point actually leads up to this of what I'm experiencing now. But what's more important is what am I going to do now? What am I going to do? Because that's actually where I'm headed, because we can always turn things around. And then there's, FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. I would say that's the biggest trick on our now right now, is that so many people are a slave to what's happening, right? So what's happening? What's happening? Who's saying? What's going on? These things, and we're slave to those things instead of like really living the life that we're to have. And so these are all the problems, and there's good things of living for now in these things. But what we see in this passage, it's astronomical. Like, people are doing normal things. They're making normal choices that everybody makes every day. But you sitting here are affected by the choices that are making here. Like, you have been influenced and been blessed or changed by the choices that these people are making. And in the midst of it, it was just like, they're not superheroes. These aren't superheroes that we're reading of. These are just everyday normal people like you and I. They didn't have anything different than you and I have, but God worked in their lives, and they decided to wake up on the inside. See, when we wake up on the inside, we reject just living for now, and we say, I want to live beyond now. And so let's read together. Verse 1. I got it here, Nikki, thanks. Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then, the family redeemer he had mentioned came by. So Boaz called out to him, "Come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you." So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as witnesses. So Boaz went. Now, remember, if you were with us or not, last chapter ended with this great cliffhanger. Like, you're watching a show, and these days it's not, you watch it next week. It's right. It's the end of the season. Oh, there's not another episode, and I can't binge watch to the next one. And you're like, what's going to happen? What do we do? Or it's left that way. And even though you're tired at night or whatever, you say, oh, we have to watch the next one. Michelle's more of a early to bed. She goes to bed earlier than me. And it'll always happen like, oh, come on. So we've come to this compromise. It's like, okay, well, let's just watch the first 5 minutes, see how it resolves, to see the next thing. And then we'll watch together. But where it ended with Boaz and Ruth last time was Ruth made the ask. She made the ask of Boaz, who was the kinsman redeemer. It was his job as a family member to redeem land and widows and all sorts of things for the family. But as she asks him, she says, "I want you to fulfill your duty." As she asks him, he says, "I'd love to, but..." There's actually a family kinsman redeemer that's closer in line than me, if we're going to play by the rules here. And so Boaz obviously wants to. Ruth and Boaz are in love. But you're kind of like, well, what's going to happen? Like, does the other guy take the responsibility, or does Boaz? Now, it says that this is all happening at the town gate, the place where men of respect and influence met. And so there was messengers would come there to do their business. Judges would come there to do their business, and leaders would come there to do their business. And they would gather around. As some cities have been excavated from this area of the world in time, there would be benches around the city gates as they would talk about things and move in things. And so if you wanted to reach a city or you wanted to change a city, it would happen at the city gates. Today, you don't necessarily have the city gates, and it's not the city halls. If you want to reach or influence a city, it's actually the schools. The schools are where it happens. The schools are where the relationships are built, the sporting events, and it's where the kids are, because that's what's important in the community. And so today you see a lot of these things happen, and how do they relate to the schools? The 10 people that he chose would have been clan leaders or heads of households. So in verse 3, it says, "And Boaz said to the family redeemer, 'You know Naomi, who came back from Moab. She is selling the land that belonged to our relative Elimelech.'" So there's strategy happening here, right? If you've ever wanted something and you're kind of like, "Hey, can I have this?" Boaz doesn't do that. He's playing chess. He's playing a game of chess that nobody else can keep up with. So in verse 4, it says, "I thought I should speak to you about it so that you can redeem it." So he only brings up land. And you say, "Wait a minute. I thought we were talking about a woman here. I thought we were talking about this." Well, Naomi had this land and she had sold it, or she was going to, so she could be provided for. And so it says, "If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I am next in line to redeem it after you." The man replied, "All right, I'll redeem it." There's people gathered around at this point. I mean, this is exciting stuff. Like this is their soap opera. Okay. This is their family comedy show and drama show, and they're gathered around. And here's the thing. I would guess that Ruth and Naomi were in the crowd somewhere. And can you imagine, to their surprise, as he says, "Okay, I'll do it." No. And us as the reader says, "Wow, well, what's going on? Like, how can this happen?" Well, Boaz approached the matter at hand with great strategy. And so he offered him something that would have been a great business deal. You see, this land, the way it would have worked is that he would be responsible for providing for Naomi. So Naomi he would provide food and a place to stay and all those things for Naomi. Now she was further in age, so he wouldn't have to marry her, even though she was a widow, because she had children. Okay. That wasn't his job. But basically, when Naomi died, he would then get the land. And then his family, his sons, would get the deal. So get it? I mean, it's, "Hey, I'll invest now, and pretty quickly I'll get this." Because the land was apportioned to the different tribes of Israel. You can read in Joshua chapter 13 to the end of the book, where they divide up the land of Israel. And every 50 years, if you lost your land to debt or you sold it, every 50 years, everything would be forgiven and everything would be returned back to you, which is pretty cool. That's why also too, when Jesus says his mission, he says he's declaring a year of Jubilee. So for 2,000 years, we've been in a perpetual year of Jubilee, where Jesus is giving back to you. Like, that's what happens when you come to Jesus. Like we talked about the failures. Jesus gives back. Even though this world takes and breaks you, Jesus gives back, and restores what has been eaten. And so 50 years is a long time, though. So gosh, would we want 50 years from now for this land to come back into the family? No, this man can do it. This is like, "Hey, I'll do it." And it's a great business deal. But the kinsman redeemer, he has a plan for his life. And he's like, "This all makes sense." But notice that we don't know his name. Everybody else's name is really there, but it doesn't say his name. It just talks about him as that guy, or the kinsman redeemer. Well, why is that? Well, I think it's because he didn't fulfill his duty. See, he had a certain duty to fulfill, and you're going to see in the next second that he didn't do it. It was actually his obligation to do it. And I know, here's the problem though. We're all rooting for Boaz. We're all rooting for Boaz, and we want that to happen. And it doesn't work that way, though. That even though we want Boaz to do it, even though that was God's way, that we'll see that Jesus would come through his lineage, that King David would come through his lineage, even though that was God's way to do it, this guy still didn't do his responsibility. And so he was disobedient to God, and he was disobedient to their culture and their people and his family. And so that's why I think his name isn't here, because he did that. He failed, right? Now, he could be redeemed as well, like we talked about. But verse 5, Boaz says, then Boaz told him, great, good deal. Now, of course, your purchase of the land for Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth. Ruth? Who's Ruth? Wait, what are we talking about here? I thought we were talking about land. The Moabite widow. So this man somehow didn't know that Ruth was in town, didn't know the story. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land and the family. Then I can't redeem it, the family redeemer replied, because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land. I cannot do it. At this point, Ruth and Naomi are cheering inside. Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. We're okay. And, the crowd, just the drama of this. This is their entertainment, the city, as they watch this going on. And so this man, Ruth was younger. And so she was a widow, and also her husband, it was the job of the Redeemer to provide so that she would have children. Now that would benefit Naomi, but also it benefits her son that Ruth was married to. And that land would then become Ruth's sons versus his sons. And so now the money he would pay would just basically be charity. It would just be a nice gesture. It wouldn't benefit him whatsoever. He was good with having more property, but not having more property split amongst others. And not only would Ruth's son and children get that, but they would also probably get a share of what he already has. So at the basic level, this didn't all fit into his financial plan. He had met with his financial advisor. Life was good. Things are going good. And, his life plan's going, his day planner's working. And then all of a sudden this comes along. At best, it would have been very awkward for him to marry Ruth. Right? Comes home to his current wife. Honey, I'm home. How was your day? By the way, this is Ruth. Now just wait a minute. Let me tell you the story. Right? And so it would have just, but that was how things were done. But he turned it down, and this man couldn't see beyond now. He couldn't see how choices could add up and how this could benefit something else. He couldn't see how the cost wasn't worth it. And he represents like a heart, a people that just says, well, it costs too much. Jesus talked primarily to people about the cost that it would take to follow him. And he talks about really like giving up your life. Surrender your life, lay down your life, and you'll live. But if you hold on to your life, you'll die. And what is he talking about? He's talking about you'll never become the person you were made to be unless you surrender it all to Jesus. Because he's the one that created you. And unless you're in relationship with him, you can't become all that you were meant to be. Because it primarily relies upon that. And so Jesus talks much about the cost. And so this was the moment where the man could awake on the inside. In other words, he had it pretty dialed, I think, on the outside. Like, in the ways of the world and in things and in career and things lined up, he was good. But there was this opportunity to be awake on the inside, like fully awake on the inside, like the real us. You see, the real us in this life can just become a slave to what's happening, can just become a slave to what's going on around us, or just getting like we're just being taken along. Life is happening to us instead of us happening to life. But this man chose not to wake up. He chose not to fulfill that. He chose something else and decided that the cost was too great. Because Christ doesn't come to build up your superficial life. He doesn't come to build up the superficialness or the unhealth or the dysfunction that we all make in our lives. He doesn't come to do that. So the mindset of receive Christ, surrender your life to Christ, give your life to Christ, because he'll just make your life better and you'll have your best life. That's true, but it's his best life for you. It's not you on steroids. Yeah, before I was just kind of okay at life and now I'm huge. That's just not it. See, Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist, he said, in regards to Jesus, he said, he must increase, I must decrease. But look at the impact that John had, even though he died a young man. Everyone he's talked about all over the world. Look at the impact. He paved the way for the Messiah. He lived his best life, but in reality, though, he lost his head, literally. And so we have to understand that this following of Jesus is, yes, you will live the best that you possibly could, the best potential that you have in Jesus, but it is not the world's way, it's God's way. And so it doesn't have to do with, I'm not going to be successful in business, or no, you could be greatly successful, but is it his? Is what you're doing yours, or does it have you? If you're successful at business, does your business have you, or do you have your business? If you have done well financially, does the finances have you, or do you have the finances? That's the question. So as verse 7, it says, now in these days, it was custom in Israel for anyone transferring a right of purchase to remove his sandal and hand it to the other party. This publicly validated the transaction. So the other family redeemer drew off his sandal as he said to Boaz, you buy the land. Now, it's interesting. It was custom. You can look in Deuteronomy about this, how this all lays out, I think chapter 25. And it's interesting. There's another part of the ceremony. If the kinsman redeemer would not take the woman as his wife, then there was a part of the ceremony where she got to spit in his face. That was part of the whole deal. So somehow, even though we're not mentioning his name, even though he didn't fulfill his duty, there's somewhat of, he showed some sort of honor because that piece wasn't there. Or Boaz, showed, hey, it's cool. I'll take, because maybe he was right there to take her. I don't know. But that part of the ceremony didn't happen. It was just the sandal. So in verse 9, it says, then Boaz said to the elders and to the crowd standing around, you are witnesses that today I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Machlon. And the land I have acquired Ruth, and with the land I have acquired Ruth, the Moabite widow of Mahlon, to be my wife. This way she can have a son to carry on the family name of her dead husband and to inherit the family property here in his hometown. You are all witnesses today. So Boaz wastes no time. He wastes no time and he says, let's do this now. Essentially what you're seeing a wedding from here on. The wedding is happening right there at the town gates. And it's like, let's just do this. Let's take care of this. The wedding is taking place between Boaz and Ruth. It's happening right now. But between Boaz and God is happening as well. And Ruth and God and Naomi and God. So this is where life is at. Where a person's life is married with God. This is where it's at. This is God's intention for you, is that your life would be married or joined with his. You see, Boaz put it all out there. It doesn't describe Boaz's life. He may not have been married, and this was his second. I don't, as far as I know, I haven't been able to find it where it says he was or was not. But maybe he had a wife too and had the land and it didn't fit into his plan, but he's responding to it. And his life is now being joined and married with God. Think about it. I worked in the restaurant business in high school and college. And so, we would take the salt shakers and the pepper and you'd marry them, right? So, one's really, you'd marry them, make one and fill another one. That was the term that was used. You marry them, you join the salt that was in the two together. And so your life, the goal that God has for your life, what he has for your life, is that your life would be married with him, which means that your success, your business, your finances, your relationships, all that you are would be joined in and integrated with his life, right? I mean, the New Testament, he's very intentional. He doesn't say, look, I'll be on a far off place and you do your thing and just follow these rules and stuff and I'll come check in every once in a while. No, he says, I'm going to live in you. By the Holy Spirit. He says, I'm going to come and take up residence in you. There's no holy place anymore besides people. It's not a building. He's going to come and actually live inside of you, God inside of you, his spirit, his life living in you. That's what is to happen, and this is where it's at. Now, notice he says, you are witnesses today. He's proclaiming what is going on. He's proclaiming the choice. He's proclaiming his love. And this is why, like a marriage certificate is so important. This is why a wedding is so important, because when you stand before a bunch of other people or one other person or anybody that witnesses it, when you stand and you're proclaiming, your love for this other person, and together you're proclaiming, we are one, we're coming together, we're doing this. It's so important. That's why he's like, you guys are witnesses. This is happening right now. Ruth and I, let's do it. I'm doing a wedding at 2:00 today, so I'm a little fired up about that. It's exciting. There's 2 people, 22-year-olds. Man, I'm so glad nobody just would come and be with me at 22. I needed 3 more years before I could be with somebody. But man, proclaiming before a bunch of other people. I mean, isn't that how you want to be loved? Isn't that how you want to be loved? That someone would stand before a bunch of other people and it's not between you and them, but it's between you, them, and God and everybody. I mean, I think that's the response that it deserves. That's the response that it deserves. It's the order. Because when we don't do it in that order, things get messed up. Because it's declaring, hey, this is it. This is, I'm proclaiming this. And there's a lot more weight put behind it, and it mirrors the importance of that. Plus, people get to witness your love, right? Oh, they're so great, And so Boaz is fired up. He's like, man, this isn't just a transaction to me. I'm going to marry this woman. And it's going to cost him, you guys. It's going to cost him greatly. But it turns out really, really good. In verse 11, it says, then the elders and all the people standing in the gate replied, we are witnesses. May the Lord make this woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, from whom all the nation of Israel descended. May you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. And may the Lord give you descendants by this young woman who will be like those of our ancestor Perez, the son of Tamar, in Judah. And so what these people are declaring is they're declaring a blessing over them. So Rachel and Leah, the wives of Jacob, they had 13 children, which was essentially the tribes of Israel, or were the tribes of Israel plus 1. They were what made Israel, that foundation. And so they're saying, may you be blessed like this. I mean, that's a big blessing. And then they talk about Perez. Perez was one of 2 twins. So there are 2 twins being born. And the tradition was that if a leg or an ankle or a wrist were to come out before anything else, they would tie a scarlet thread around that wrist or ankle or whatever, so that they would know who came out first, right? Just to make sure. But what happens is the baby, which was not Perez, the other baby, they pulled the wrist back in, and then Perez says, "Here I am." Perez is born, and so Perez actually means you forced the breach, you breached. Sorry, I'm getting too graphic here. Sorry. Okay. All right. Woo! Okay. I'll hold back my hands. Okay. You went ahead and took the birthright for yourself. That's the idea that's being communicated here. And the baby that stuck his wrist out was born second. And so it's just and Perez was just blessed. His house was blessed, and it was just just known that he was just a blessed person, and his family was as well. So that's what they're saying. So verse 13, let's read. We're going to read this large section and see what happens here. So Boaz took Ruth into his home, and she became his wife. When he slept with her, the Lord enabled her to become pregnant, and she gave birth to a son. Then the women of the town said to Naomi, "Praise the Lord, who has now provided a redeemer for your family. May this child be famous in Israel. May he restore your youth and care for you in your old age. For he is the son of your daughter-in-law, who loves you and has been better to you than 7 sons." Naomi took the baby and cuddled him to her breast, and she cared for him as if he were her own. The neighbor women said, "Now at last Naomi has a son again," and they named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse and the grandfather of David. This is the genealogical record of their ancestor Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Salmon was the father of Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed. Now we're caught up. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of David. And so compare this to the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1, and you will see that Jesus comes through this line. So the Savior of the world comes through this. That's why it's beyond now. Like something's happening here, and it's beyond just this moment. And so Ruth and Boaz are the great-grandparents of King David. So Jesus, the Savior of the world, will come through them. Naomi's return to Bethlehem and Ruth going with her made it so that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem, that David would be born in Bethlehem, that God resolved this family crisis. This is a big family crisis. I mean, you read here, if you ever wonder, can anything, can my family be helped in the problems you have in your family? Read right here. This is a big problem in their family. And look how God resolves it. People not taking responsibility, not stepping up. There's sin, there's death, there's failures, there's brokenness. And look how God resolves it, because Ruth and Naomi led the way, and they said, we are going to seek God. We're going to put God first in our life. We're going to put him first instead of anything else. So God resolved that family crisis. So recognize in your own life, the train is going somewhere, people. You're 70 or 100 years, whatever it is, that's just not it. You are a locomotive, and you're on the stage right now. There's those that have come before you in your family. There's those that will come after you. But it's your time right now. This isn't a dress rehearsal. And you are influencing. It is your time to influence. And so the question that's out there is, will you put God first and have all that God designed you and your family for become? Or will you fall into the trap of just being caught up into the wave and everything of the day? See, Ruth rejected what seemed like her best circumstance to have a husband and to have children and have a good life. It would have been in her homeland. But she said, no, I'm going all after God. I'm going all after God, and that's what I'm doing. And even though nobody else follows, I'm going after God, right? All to Jesus I surrender. All to him I freely give. The cross before me, the world behind me, though no one else will follow. All to him I freely give. That last part, I don't know if it's the end, but I threw it in there. So, right? But you get it. Am I going to go all in? Am I make God number one in my life or not? But look at her now. Ruth put God first, and she's experiencing the blessing. Look she's blessed. She found somebody that truly loves her, and she's blessed. She has children. It talks about a husband and a son here. Naomi lost both, and Ruth lost a husband in the hope of children, and Naomi would now be cared for by Boaz as well. So this beauty that's happening here. And Naomi went from bitter. Remember, she changed her name to Mara. She goes, don't call me Naomi, which means pleasant and good. She says, call me Mara, bitter. And she went, those same women that she came into town saying, call me bitter, are now saying, blessed are you. Look what God can do, you guys, when you put him first in your life. So you will never regret what you truly sacrifice for God. You'll never regret it. He will never deny you. Whatever you sacrifice for him will come back to you 10 and 100-fold. Whatever you give, whatever you put down in him will come back. It won't look like a lot of the time the ways of the world. Don't try to put it into a category, but blessings come from him and he's good. So for you today, realize that he will never let you down. He'll never let you down. This story is just one of millions that he's worked in people's lives. Millions and billions, probably. People that trust in him, and he works it around. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul did a good summation, I think, not speaking directly to Ruth, but I think it encompasses the whole chapter or the whole book as we've seen. He writes in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, he says, "And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them." And so know that as you trust in him and put him first in your life, you'll never regret it. He'll never let you down. He'll always put it back together.
Thanks for listening this week. If you are looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, go to vkcwest.com.